They thought it would be just another carefully managed royal-adjacent sit-down, a polished BBC studio, a calm, measured interviewer, a famous guest with a perfectly pressed white shirt and rehearsed talking points. But as the cameras rolled and the red BBC News banner burned across screens, it took less than 5 minutes for viewers at home to realize something was wrong. Meghan Markle wasn't just defensive this time, she was openly combative. And Laura Kuenssberg, Britain's famously unflappable political interviewer, was about to discover what happened when a guest treated a serious news program like a stage for her own ego. Before the hour was over, one of them would walk away, and the other would shut the whole thing down. The BBC studio was designed to look calm, neutral, almost polite. Large floor-to-ceiling screens projected a stylized view of Downing Street. Black door, white stone, iron railings. 2 bright red chairs faced each other over a pale wooden coffee table, 2 glasses of water perfectly aligned like props in a theater. Overhead, cool blue and white lights washed everything in a reassuring institutional glow. Laura Kuenssberg sat in one of the red chairs, posture straight but relaxed, a stack of cards balanced on her knee. She wore a simple red dress that matched the chair, the color popping against the austere backdrop. Her expression was calm, professional, someone who had weathered prime ministers, crises, and scandals without ever letting her voice crack. Opposite her, Meghan Markle was already sitting when the countdown reached 3. White shirt tucked into slim black trousers, ankles crossed neatly, back straight, hands folded. But there was a tightness in her jaw, a sharpness to her eyes. Her hair was pulled into a low, severe bun, giving her face a sculpted, almost brittle look. Studios live in 3, 2. The floor manager's voice faded as the red light blinked on. "Good evening," Laura began, her voice even, her accent crisp and familiar to millions. "Tonight on BBC News, we speak to a woman who has been at the center of royal, political, and cultural storms on both sides of the Atlantic. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, thank you for joining us." Meghan tilted her head just slightly. "You're welcome," she said smoothly. "Though I do hope this isn't going to be another attempt to turn my life into entertainment." Already a little static in the air, Laura smiled politely. "This is a news program, not a drama," she replied. "So let's start with something simple. You've been living in America for some time now. When you look back at the UK, at the monarchy, at everything that's happened, how do you see it?" Meghan let out a soft, humorless laugh. "How do I see it?" she repeated. "As a chapter I outgrew. People here seem to struggle with that idea. They cling to this fantasy that I should be forever grateful for. Proximity to a building with a balcony." The audience at home couldn't be heard, but a silent jolt ran somewhere between the control room and the gallery. Laura kept her expression neutral. "Some would say," Laura replied, "that it was more than proximity. You married into an institution that represents the state. You benefited from that platform. Do you feel any sense of responsibility for the fallout that followed?" Meghan's eyes narrowed a fraction. "It's interesting," she said slowly, "that whenever people talk about fallout, they look at me rather than at the institution that failed to protect me. No one ever asks whether they feel responsibility." "I've asked them that too," Laura said calmly. "Tonight, I'm asking you." "And I'm telling you," Meghan shot back, "that my responsibility is to my own well-being and my family, not to an outdated system that was more concerned with headlines than my mental health." Laura glanced at her cards, then back at Meghan. "You mentioned your family," she continued. "There have been reports that your relationship with Prince Harry has been under strain, particularly with the pressures of media projects, business ventures, and..." Meghan cut her off with a small, sharp gesture. "You mean gossip," she said. "Let's use the correct word. British media love to cloak their obsession as concern or reports. It's gossip. And frankly, I'm surprised that on the BBC you're repeating it." There was no raised voice, no shouting, but the edge in her tone sliced cleanly through the studio air. "I'm asking," Laura said, voice steady, "because you chose to make parts of your relationship public, through interviews, documentaries, your book, podcasts. When you put your story into the public sphere, people are going to ask follow-up questions. That's how accountability works." Meghan smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Accountability is an interesting word coming from British media," she said. especially after the way this country has treated women who don't fit neatly into its expectations. So, is that how you see yourself? Laura pressed lightly. As someone Britain failed? I see myself, Meghan replied coolly, as someone who survived a system that wanted a silent, smiling figurehead. And when I refused to be that, suddenly I became difficult, demanding, divisive. It's not particularly original. Laura nodded, acknowledging the point without accepting it. Let's talk about America, she said. You've spoken about finding freedom there. Yet critics say you've traded one institution for another. Hollywood, streaming platforms, big media deals. Do you feel you've simply moved from one kind of power structure to another? Meghan's shoulders lifted in a faint shrug. Honestly, that sounds like something a think tank panel would say, she replied. Real. People understand that when you've been caged, finding a way to use your voice isn't hypocrisy. It's survival. If I choose to work with companies that amplify my message, that's called strategy, not betrayal. Laura's eyes sharpened almost imperceptibly. Some would argue, she said, that the message often seems to circle back to you. Your pain, your struggle, your courage. Do you worry that the causes you say you care about, mental health, equality, women's rights, get lost behind the focus on you? Meghan's jaw tightened. It's fascinating, she said, her voice cooling further, how women are criticized for centering their own stories. When men write memoirs or talk about their battles, they're called brave. When I do it, it's self-absorbed. I've learned not to internalize that double standard. I'm not asking you to internalize anything, Laura countered. I'm asking whether you can see how some viewers might feel fatigued by hearing the same story, repeated in different formats. And I'm telling you, Meghan snapped, that if people are fatigued by hearing the truth, that says more about them than about me. For a moment, the two women simply stared at each other across the neat wooden table, water glasses untouched, the studio quiet enough that the faint hum of the lights seemed to grow louder. Laura shifted her cards to one side, choosing not to look at them. All right, she said. Let's address something very specific. There have been questions about discrepancies between different interviews you've given, details about conversations, events, timelines. Some people say your narrative evolves. Do you understand why that raises questions? Meghan's lips parted in disbelief. Are you accusing me of lying on live television? She asked, voice low, dangerous. I'm saying, Laura replied evenly, that when the public is asked to accept your story as a basis for major decisions, stepping away from royal duties, public perception of the monarchy, international debates, it is reasonable for journalists to ask about consistency. Meghan let out a breathy laugh. Consistency? She repeated. Trauma isn't a perfectly edited script, Laura. It doesn't come with timestamps and footnotes. When you're living it, you're just trying to survive. And yet somehow, I'm expected to be a human hard drive with flawless recall for your fact-checking. It's not my fact-checking, Laura said softly. It's the public's right to ask questions when someone uses their pain as a platform. Meghan's eyes flashed. You mean when a woman refuses to sit quietly and play the Grateful Duchess, she said. Let's at least be honest about what bothers people. From the gallery, a producer's voice came through Laura's earpiece, a quiet reminder to move on, to keep the pace steady. She ignored it. All right, she said instead, leaning forward just slightly. Let's talk about something that isn't about the institution, or the press, or Britain. Let's talk about you, right now. If you stripped away the titles, the deals, the cameras, who is Meghan Markle? Meghan blinked slowly, as if the question offended her by its simplicity. Someone, she said at last, who doesn't owe this country, or this program, an apology for choosing herself. Laura held her gaze, feeling the tension thicken like fog between them. That, she said quietly, is exactly what we're going to explore after the break. The red light flicked off, the studio monitor cut to a graphic, and the crew finally exhaled. But on the two red chairs in the middle of the set, neither woman moved. Meghan sat with her arms folded a little tighter now, jaw set. Laura studied her for a moment, weighing the next line of questions. In the gallery, someone murmured, "This is going to blow up." They had no idea just how far it was about to go. When the red light blinked back on after the break, the atmosphere in the studio felt noticeably different. The quiet during the advertisement had not softened anything. If anything, it had sharpened the edges. Laura Kuenssberg adjusted slightly in her chair, voice returning with the same professional calm the BBC was famous for. "Welcome back. I'm speaking with Meghan, Duchess of Sussex." She didn't repeat the title with any extra warmth this time. "Before the break," Laura continued, "we were talking about truth, memory, and accountability. I want to move forward, but I want to stay with one important point. You've said repeatedly that you felt silenced in your former life, yet today, you are one of the most visible public figures in the world. Do you accept that visibility comes with scrutiny?" Meghan's lips pressed into a thin smile. "Scrutiny is one thing, harassment is another, and Britain has always blurred that line when it comes to me." "I'm not asking about the tabloids," Laura said. "I'm asking about the public, taxpayers, viewers, people who feel they've been asked to take sides in a conflict they never chose." Meghan scoffed quietly. "People take sides because they're encouraged to, because conflict sells, because it's easier to turn me into a symbol than to confront the failures of the institution itself." Laura didn't flinch. "Let's talk about those failures. You've accused the royal household of neglect, of indifference to your well-being, even of cruelty. Yet senior figures within the palace have denied those claims. Some former staff say your portrayal omits your own conduct. How do you respond to that?" "That's predictable," Meghan replied coolly. "When powerful systems feel threatened, they rewrite history. It's what institutions have always done." "So everyone else is lying?" Laura asked. "Except you?" Meghan's eyes hardened. "No, I'm saying that when the imbalance of power is that extreme, truth becomes inconvenient." Laura paused deliberately. "Let's talk about power then. Because for many viewers, you now sit on the other side of that imbalance. You command enormous media platforms, lucrative contracts, global attention. Do you ever reflect on how much influence you now wield?" Meghan tilted her head slightly. "Influence is a strange word. I'd say visibility. And visibility doesn't equal power when you're still constantly attacked." "But it does give you the ability to shape narratives," Laura replied. "And that brings me to your media projects, your documentary series, your podcasts, your memoir. Some critics argue they present a one-directional story, your voice, your truth, but little room for contradiction." Meghan leaned back into her chair, crossing her arms. "Are you suggesting I invite my abusers onto my platform for a friendly debate?" "I'm suggesting," Laura said evenly, "that when public claims carry geopolitical implications, diplomatic tension, institutional trust, it's not unreasonable for journalists to ask about corroboration." Meghan's jaw tightened. "So now my personal trauma is a matter of state architecture?" "You made it one," Laura replied gently, "by taking it global." For the first time, Meghan's composure cracked just a little. Her breath quickened. "You're framing this like I plotted some grand campaign," she said. "I told my story because I was breaking, because I was desperate. And now you're sitting here with your neat little cards trying to intellectualize my pain into a policy debate." "This isn't personal," Laura said. "It's public." "Everything becomes public when you're married to a prince," Meghan shot back. "You above all people should understand that." Laura held her gaze. "That may be true, but many will point out that you chose to remain public even after leaving royal life. That was not forced upon you." Meghan's voice cooled. "And you assume that disappearing would have brought peace. That's naive." Laura shifted tack, but not the pressure. "Let's talk about your children," she said. "You've spoken powerfully about protecting them from the sort of intrusion you endured. Yet they are also, by birth, linked to one of the most scrutinized families in the world. How do you reconcile those two realities?" Meghan's eyes flicked to the side, then back. "My children are not public property." "No," Laura agreed, "but they are part of a story you continue to tell publicly. Their future titles, their upbringing, even their place in the line of succession have been discussed by you in interviews." Meghan exhaled sharply. "Because when I don't speak, others speak for me, and they rarely tell the truth." "Some would say," Laura replied calmly, "that speaking constantly also keeps the spotlight exactly where you say you don't want it." Meghan's fingers tightened against the armrest. "So, what's your solution? Silence? Erasure? Should I just vanish to make people comfortable?" "No," Laura said. My question is whether there's a point where engagement becomes preservation of conflict rather than healing from it. Meghan laughed, short and dismissive. That sounds like something people who've never had to fight for their narrative would say. Laura studied her carefully. You often talk about fighting, she said, against the palace, against the press, against Britain, against critics. Do you ever worry that you're now fighting the world itself? For a brief second, Meghan hesitated. Then the familiar armor slid back into place. I worry, she said coolly, about raising children in a world where powerful institutions are never questioned. If that means I'm fighting, then yes, I will always fight. Even if that fight leaves scorched earth behind, Laura asked quietly. Meghan's eyes sharpened. Sometimes that's what change costs. Laura leaned forward just slightly now. And what about the cost to Prince Harry, to his relationship with his father, his brother, his country? Meghan stiffened visibly. Harry is an adult. He makes his own choices. Of course, Laura said. But he has also, by his own admission, lost almost all contact with his former family. Do you take any responsibility for that outcome? Meghan's smile was tight, strained. That's a deeply offensive question. It's a fair one, Laura replied immediately. When two people enter a partnership, their consequences intertwine. The public wants to know whether you acknowledge any personal role in where he stands today. Meghan's voice dropped. Let me be very clear. I didn't sever Harry from his family. The institution did that long before I ever entered it. I simply refused to be collateral damage for their dysfunction. Laura didn't blink. And yet, he left with you. Yes, Meghan replied sharply. Because he chose freedom. Or exile, Laura said. The word hung in the air like a sudden chill. Meghan's eyes flared. You're twisting language to provoke a narrative. I'm reflecting the way many in Britain describe it, Laura said, including those who once admired you. Meghan shook her head slowly, her expression hardening into something close to contempt. I see what you're doing now. You're not interviewing me. You're prosecuting me. No, Laura replied, voice calm but unyielding. I'm questioning you. That is the job. And I don't have to sit here and accept hostile framing dressed up as objectivity, Meghan snapped. Laura met her gaze without flinching. You're right, she said quietly. You don't have to. But you did agree to this interview. Meghan fell silent for a moment, breathing visibly, the tension now unmistakable even through the screen. Laura glanced briefly at her cards, then placed them face down on her knee. All right, she said. Let's move to one final area for this segment, your future. You've spoken about building a new legacy outside royal life. What, specifically, do you want the world to remember you for in 20 years' time? Meghan straightened, her voice regaining its polished confidence. For choosing myself, for protecting my children, for speaking when it would have been easier to stay silent. And if the world remembers conflict instead of courage? Laura asked. Meghan's lips curved into that familiar, controlled smile. Then that will say more about the world than about me. Laura held her gaze for a long second. We'll continue after the break, she said. As the cameras cut away again, the studio felt colder than before. Meghan leaned back, arms crossing tightly. Laura took a slow breath, eyes distant for a moment, as she listened to the frantic whispers flooding her earpiece. In the control room, one producer said quietly, "She's not backing down." Another replied, just as quietly, "Neither is Laura." And for the first time that night, it became clear to everyone watching, this interview was no longer about answers. It was about who would break first. The red light blinked on again. No music, no soft reset, just pressure. Laura Kuenssberg sat upright, her note cards untouched now. Whatever patience she had entered the studio with was gone, not replaced by anger, but by something colder. Resolve. Welcome back. This is our final segment. Meghan nodded once, chin lifted, arms still crossed tight to her body like armor. Laura didn't ease into it. Let's talk about money, she said. A subtle shift passed through Meghan's eyes. You and Prince Harry have signed multi-million-dollar media deals while repeatedly stating that your motivation is healing, privacy, and protection. Many viewers struggle to reconcile those two realities. Do you? Meghan exhaled sharply. Oh, here we go. Yes, Laura said. Here we go. People are always far more comfortable when women suffer for free, Meghan replied coolly. If I tell my story without compensation, I'm exploited. If I'm paid for it, I'm accused of greed. It's a convenient trap. Laura's voice stayed level. It's not the payment alone that raises the question. It's the repetition. Each platform restates the same grievances while insisting the past has been left behind. Which is it? Meghan leaned forward now. You want a soundbite? Fine. Trauma doesn't expire on your schedule. And credibility? Laura asked. Does that ever expire? Meghan's jaw tightened. You keep implying deception. If you have an accusation, state it plainly. All right, Laura said. Several claims made in your interviews have been challenged by court documents, third-party witnesses, and your own previous statements. Do you accept that some of your public narratives contain inconsistencies? Meghan laughed, short and sharp. Inconsistencies exist when journalists cherry-pick. Or when memory conflicts with record, Laura replied immediately. Silence. Thick, heavy. Meghan's eyes hardened into something flat. This is not journalism. This is character assassination dressed up as civility. Laura didn't raise her voice. That somehow made it worse. No, she said quietly. This is accountability. And accountability doesn't become persecution simply because the subject dislikes the questions. Meghan shook her head. You are not neutral. I never claimed to be, Laura said. I claim to be fair. Fair to whom? Meghan snapped. The institution that discarded me, the press that hunted me, the public that demands blood in exchange for sympathy? Laura leaned in just a fraction. Fair to the truth. Meghan's composure began to crack properly now. I don't owe Britain anything, she said sharply. Not explanation, not gratitude, not silence. I survived that system. I escaped it. And yet you still need it, Laura replied calmly. It's attention, it's outrage, it's audience. Meghan stood slightly in her chair, then sat back down, controlled but visibly shaken. You're determined to cast me as a manipulator, she said. No, Laura answered. I'm asking whether you accept that your choices create consequences beyond your pain. And I'm saying those consequences were already written for me, Meghan fired back, no matter what I did. Laura paused, studying her. Then let me ask a direct question, she said. One the public consistently asks, and you consistently avoid. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Do you regret anything? A beat, then another. Meghan's voice dropped. I regret believing that kindness would protect me. That's not what I asked, Laura said. Do you regret any action you personally took? The silence stretched too long. Meghan's expression hardened completely. This line of questioning is finished. Laura did not retreat. No, she said quietly. This interview is reflecting exactly what viewers have long suspected. That responsibility always ends somewhere outside yourself. Meghan stared at her, stunned. Laura continued, now firm. You've blamed the palace, the press, the country, even vague forces of history. But at no moment today have you acknowledged a single misjudgment of your own. That is why public trust remains fractured. Meghan leaned forward, anger now fully visible. You invited me here under false pretenses. No, Laura said evenly. You accepted the invitation knowing exactly who I am. And you used me as a spectacle, Meghan snapped. I used my platform for questioning, Laura corrected. Meghan shook her head, laughing bitterly. You wanted a villain. Congratulations. You've written the script perfectly. Laura's voice turned ice steady. No, what I want is honesty, and you have refused it at every turn. Meghan pointed slightly with one finger. You do not define my honesty. No, Laura said, but I do define the standards of this program. The room felt airless now. Producers shifted wildly behind the glass. No one cut the feed. Meghan's voice sharpened to a razor edge. Then stop pretending this is an interview. Admit it's a trial. Laura didn't hesitate. All right, she said. Here's the verdict for this program. This conversation cannot continue respectfully. Meghan froze. Laura looked directly into the camera now. When a guest repeatedly refuses accountability, redirects every question into grievance, and treats fair challenge as personal attack, the interview ceases to serve the public. She turned back to Meghan. For that reason, I am ending this discussion now. Meghan's face flushed. You're silencing me again, she snapped. No, Laura replied calmly. I am protecting the integrity of this space. She stood. This interview is over. You may leave the studio. For a moment, Meghan didn't move. Then she rose abruptly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. This is exactly who you are, she said coldly. You pretend to be measured while executing people on air. Laura did not respond. As Meghan walked toward the exit, microphones catching every sharp breath, she turned once at the door. You won't control the story, she said. Laura answered quietly. Perhaps not, but I will not surrender the questions. Meghan left the room. The camera held on Laura alone. She turned slowly back toward the lens. Thank you for watching. Good night. The screen faded to black. If this tension-filled confrontation kept you on edge until the very last second, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real-time drama and powerful interview stories. Your support helps us bring you the moments they never want fully seen. Turn on notifications, because the next story may be even more explosive.